You're listening to There's a Lesson in Here Somewhere, a podcast featuring compelling conversations with exceptional people. Whether it's an inspirational achievement, a hardship overcome, or simply a unique perspective, these are stories we can all learn from. Here are your hosts, Jamie Serino and Carlos Arcila.
Hello and welcome to There's a Lesson in Here Somewhere. I'm Jamie Serino.
And I'm Carlos Arcila.
And we're here today with Pete Carucci and Becky Davis from the 426. The 426 is both a band and a studio. I've known Pete since the 90s, since the last century. Pete and I were in some bands together. We recorded some music. We had a lot of fun. I think produced a lot of good art. And Pete and I have stayed in touch over the years. Parted ways, had different bands, had other bands, other projects, but we always stayed in touch. We always stayed friends. And one day Pete told me that he formed this studio with Becky, and we'll hear a little bit more about how they met, and we'll hear a little bit more about how they created that studio, and then how they formed the band, and then also recorded an album. And it's really, really great stuff. But the bigger reason why we asked them to be with us today is because they do this wonderful project where they help people write songs. And I had first heard about it as songwriting for veterans. And it ends up being this therapeutic process, even helping with PTSD. But then I learned that they also do this with seniors and other groups of people. So we're going to talk to Pete and Becky about that project as well. So Pete and Becky, I'll turn it over to you. You could do a fuller introduction. I'd like to hear more about how you met and how you formed the studio, the band, and then we'll get into this songwriting project.
Well, before we jump in there, like 426, what is that? I mean, start off with the name, because
that's a good place to start. Yeah.
Super interesting. I heard you guys before play, and so I always wonder, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, probably the most common asked question. So we're happy to start there. It's a good place to start. And it's our origin story, actually. So it's all starts on April 26th, 426. It's the day that Peter and I very first sang together as a duo. We had previously met 2 years before that at a concert that we were both doing with our respective bands for a local nonprofit. And we saw each other singing. I think I did some backup vocals for this group that day.
Well, actually, it was an event hosted by Paul Schaefer.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first memory of Becky is we were rehearsing, and it was, what's the song?
A Little Help
for My Friends. And all these guys were all, there's like many guitarists, were there like 5 guitarists?
Yeah.
And I heard someone play an F sharp minor. And she's the only girl, mind you, playing guitar way over on stage right. And I'm standing next to Paul Schaefer, and I stop and I go, whoa, hold on. He's like, what? I go, someone over there is playing an F sharp minor. And
Yeah, guess who it wasn't?
Wasn't her.
It wasn't me.
It was someone else, one of our friends who will remain nameless. And I kind of knew it was him, but all the guys went like this.
Right.
And then she looks over like,
Right at me.
she's gonna kill me.
Yeah,
That's my first
actually
memory.
how we
Yeah. So,
first.
yes.
So it's kind of funny that
Yeah.
we do joke about F sharp minors often. You
Yeah,
hear
that
that?
song.
That's why. Yeah.
Well, the band could have been F sharp minor.
It really could have been. Yeah. So that's how we met, but we didn't really end up playing together until 2 years later. And then it was on April 26th when we got together in 2017. And we were thinking, could we start to sing together? And let's see if we still, remember each other's voices and like how we sound together. And we did.
Yeah.
And then a year later, we were incorporating our studio to go beyond just performing, to do our studio. And we're trying to come up with names. We can't come up with a name for the studio.
And I was like, well, today's April 22nd. Why don't we just call it April 22nd? And she noted, well, actually,
right,
we're going in to incorporate on the 26th, a year after the first rehearsal. So it was like, what's the term? Kismet or whatever,
Right.
like It
Yeah.
just seemed to fit. And so instead of April 26th, like you don't put up a sign, come see April 26th on May 1st. You know, it's like, so she's like, 4/26 is probably cooler. I was like, it's
Yeah.
great. So we're the 4/26.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. And so just so everyone knows, the website though is, yeah, can you spell it out for
Yeah.
everybody?
THE, and then 4 spelled out FOUR, and the number's 26.
Okay.
So it's like April 26th, 4.
.com.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
And then our studio page is that same thing, 426 Studios. So FOUR spelled out and the number's 26. So we have 2 websites because we like to be complicated, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Now,
Right.
do you put yourselves in the genre or genre agnostic, or how would you describe your sound?
Well, our studio is very genre agnostic because when we do custom songs or when we do our Share Your Story program, those genres really depend on who we're writing with and who we're writing for. But
Yeah.
our own original music, which is what's under the 426.com, that's our Americana duo, our band, and we just released an album just this past April,
June.
June,
June
yeah.
1st.
We released our single on April 26th. Of
Look at
course.
that.
We like
Our
to be
first single.
thematic.
Yeah.
So you launched the studio first and then you formed a band?
We formed the band first.
You formed the band first.
I actually joined the band that they were part of. It kind of slowly morphed into the 426, and then we set up the studio.
Yeah, and we had originally decided to start writing songs in our studio to be custom songs, which we still do. Like a client will come and say, we had a really sweet one this past Father's Day, where someone hired us to write a song to surprise her husband on Father's Day from her and her daughter, which was really sweet. And so like we were like, we're gonna dive into writing and crafting custom songs and producing them in our studio. And then the next thing you know, we wound up playing so many different gigs here and there, and we're trying to break into TV and film and sync stuff. And so I think strangely enough, we returned to doing that kind of custom song work through the Share Your Story program, where each song is so specific and really has a, I don't know, like a specific space,
So what is that Share Your Story program? What is that? You've said that twice. Like what is that? Maybe.
So Share Your Story is different. So custom songs that's when we would write a song for someone. So they would hire us to write a song for an anniversary, and we write the song. The Share Your Story program is different. So it kind of has 2 parts. We go to the participants, we sit down with them, and they are in a songwriting session, just like in Nashville when you go to a co-write and you say, we're co-writing from 1 to 3 on Thursday, and everybody comes to the room ready to, write. So we do that with individuals. We kicked it off with a veteran, and we met him, and he brought his wife. She came into the songwriting session.
Actually, she brought him.
That's true.
He didn't want to do it.
Yeah, he didn't want to do it.
He was reticent.
Yeah.
Then he winds up saying it was like he literally said when we wound up performing it, it was like one of the greatest experiences of his life. And then his wife was like, "What about me?"
Yeah.
Well, was he a musician?
No, so no, you don't.
So these people don't even have to be musicians.
Not at all.
Amazing. Okay.
That's the thing. You just have to come with your story. So we're the musicians, and we bring the artistry and the craft, and the individuals, their contribution in the songwriting room is their story. And it's our job as songwriters to elicit their story and to just we just ask them to talk. We can ask them questions, but people tend to get going once you're in the room and they start talking. And we write it live. So that's a pretty magical part of the program. And I think that's the thing that probably takes the participants by surprise the most.
Yeah.
The fact that we walk in cold, we don't send a questionnaire in advance, nothing. And we just warm up with them by asking them, like, who's your favorite artist? What are your favorite songs? And Peter kind of starts playing some of them. We kind of get everybody loosened up. We find a genre that way. We kind of find what they love that way. And then Peter will start noodling on a melody, and then we'll start to ask them about their story. They start to tell us. I start to grab some words. we start to craft some things and we try it on with them and we just go. It's just, you know, like, how about this for a first verse? And is that hitting? Does that sound like it's right? And without fail, they're pretty stunned because people just don't normally get to see the songwriting process.
Yeah.
And then also to have your story come back at you that someone has just listened to
Yeah.
and crafted it into something that is put to music. It's a very moving experience.
It's really special too, because like some of the genres, like the first one that we did with Larry Cowden, a retired submariner, was really into Johnny Cash. So it has that kind of feel.
Mhm.
We did one with a 93-year-old senior from Holland, who literally escaped a Nazi onslaught where she had to sleep in ditches, but she was talking about how much she loved her husband.
Yeah.
Mm.
The next thing you know, it's got the Sinatra riff, you know, and the whole song isn't about necessarily the experience during World War II, but her 70 years of marriage and love with her husband. And so they all have this, and they're all resonating with the truth of your experience coming out. And it's very magical because you go in, I don't think we've seen it. They're always like, what happens now? Or they think they have to show up and I'm going to write a song with you.
Right.
And it's really the opposite. And then they're all, okay, what happens now? And then they're just talking. And then there's like a verse and a chorus. Like my favorite one is probably when you kind of surprised the 93-year-old when like I had this cool riff and she goes, I think I got something. And then she just sang like basically the exact words that she had experienced when she met her husband. And we just, then we massaged it and then there's the chorus and it's great.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So when you worked with that first veteran, did he get into like stories of war and, you know, what, you know, did it get like that or was it about something else?
Well, so Larry didn't see active wartime duty. He was a Cold War submariner.
Okay.
And their missions that his particular submarine fleet ran was considered to be the beginning of the end of the Cold War.
Okay.
They were tracking subs. I mean, I didn't know anything about submarining before we sat down and chatted with him. So he was explaining how they were tracking subs and, you know, water conducts sound so quickly and easily. So they have to be dead silent. And at that time, there were no digital clocks. So everything was analog. And so they couldn't even have clocks. And so they had to mark the hours, as he said, minute by minute.
Wow.
Someone was in charge of counting to 60, marking a minute, counting to 60, marking a minute. Like, can you imagine? Because you can't make a noise. You can't have a clock ticking because they are literally stalking a Soviet sub that doesn't know that, you know, they're on the tail
In the
of.
Baltic Sea.
Yeah. So yeah, he talked a lot about the mental
Transistor.
the mental toll that takes not to see sunlight, you know, for 60 days, to not be able to speak, to not be able to make any sounds. And he did talk about a story, it was during a training, but a story where things went south and he thought he was going to die. And that was very emotional.
The submarine lost power and was sinking. And when he started telling it, I mean, he was tearing up. We were tearing up. He didn't think he was going to make it because you get down to what's called crush depth.
Right.
Ship implodes. And I think there was even a fire, right?
That's right. And
only one transistor was still working to signal the emergency, I guess, buoy air thing. It wound up coming just in time. And I mean, he was so emotional about it. And here's a gentleman who had kept all that in since he retired in 1982.
I think that's right. And his wife had never even heard that story.
Wow.
She was sitting there. I mean, he was emotional. He was crying. We were all crying. And because for him to recount that story was very traumatic for him. And cathartic for him. You know, he told the story and his wife was like, I never heard that story. There were so many stories. She said, I never heard that. I never knew that. And the second part of the program is that we record the songs in our studio for the individuals, and then we play them live out in a public forum. And the point of that really is that to give people the opportunity to have their story witnessed
Yeah.
is so important when you share something like that. And Larry, we wrote his song over Memorial Day. We played his song on 4th of July. And his daughter came up, and his grandson, and
Yeah.
they had never heard the story.
And we had taught it to the whole, or we have a backing band, even though we're a main duo, we perform a lot as a duo, we have a full backing band, and we taught it to them. And so he comes up on stage, and there was like 400 or 500 people there.
Yeah, it was a big wedding.
And I'm crying. I don't know how we got through the song.
Yeah.
And it's a fun song too. It's called Crazy Like a Fox. Because he's like, when you're down there, you got to be crazy like a fox, to go into a submarine for 20 years, And so that's when I think they all came in, and he said, this is like the greatest experience of my life. And then his wife's like, what's wrong? What about me?
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, it reminds me of this short story. I can't remember the author, but it's a pretty brief story. It's this kid talking about his grandfather, and his grandfather keeps telling him this story from World War II. And it's a really traumatic story. And the character in the story had to do something that was very disturbing. And he kept telling the grandson the story. And at one point he pulls him into a closet and shuts the door and tells him the story. And then they exit the closet. And that's like the end of the story. And it's this whole thing of this like repetitive telling of the story. But something is not clicking for this person, And so I was just always, you just reminded me of that. So I think it's amazing to take a story that might either be buried or not often told, and then you're putting it into a different context, putting it into a different art form. You're involving music, different parts of your brain. So it really can be healing. It can be, as you're saying, cathartic, therapeutic. And
Definitely
so,
healing. Yeah.
yeah.
A
And
lot of healing.
so when the woman brought her husband in, was it just like this novelty thing, or was it because she felt like he had this story that he had to tell, or like, did she talk about like why she brought him in?
Well, what I remember is that, when it was put out there, because we partner with the Main Street Community Center in Windham, New York.
Mhm.
Shout out to them. And when it was put out, I think she was in like one of the women's groups there, and she saw this and was like, "This could be fun for him." And I mean, he'll tell you, like, I did not want to go.
Right.
He dragged me in there, but
Yeah.
he had such a blast. We had fun. Like, he comes to our shows, we see him, we play
Yeah.
his song still.
That's great.
And I wanted to say something that I hadn't really thought of, but speaking with you, Jamie, not only a musician, and Carlos is a musician, but also I know you're, artist and etc. What I find through this process is it's not just music. It's not like we're just playing a song and teasing out a couple details. It's like we're really getting to fully dive into with someone to their life's journey.
Yeah.
Get out, and we write a song, and then what Becky was saying before is then it's performed, it's celebrated. There's a
Right.
product that they have, like Joanne had it on MP3 and all those other, so they have it, so
Yeah.
it's got like a fourth, it's like I want to say it's multidimensional kind of art in a way. For me, I feel it, especially like when we did a performance. We wrote this last cadre of songs in Wyndham, and then we did the performance. Like we're tearing up, everyone's tearing up. I mean, it's so powerful.
Yeah, because it's not like they would get up on stage and tell that story, and especially sing that song or write that song or whatever, especially if they're not musicians. But even just to get up on stage and tell the story, and it seems like with that one guy, he didn't even tell his wife that story, and so here's this different forum, and so I think it's wonderful. So you've worked with veterans so far. You've worked with some senior citizens. Are there any other groups, or are you planning to work with any other groups of people?
Yeah, so then this last round, we actually did a few intergenerational. We did 2 intergenerational songs where we had one senior and one teen in the songwriting room, and we wrote a song with them together. And that's something that it was really great. We were a little worried about like, oh, how are we going to do that? Right. Because everybody's stories are so unique. But when we sat with it, one of the things that we realized was the process of telling your story. If you do it right, people can see themselves in your story, because we are all way more common than we are separate. Right. And so there is something universal to be found in most stories, whether it's just, oh, I've been scared, or I've been sad, or, it may not be the specificity. So we really challenged ourselves with those two particular co-writes, because just to say, how do we find a common theme that they can write a story around? And so once we figured that out, it was great. And then we had great co-writing sessions with both of them. And that was very interesting to do. So it was fun to write with teens, to hear their perspectives and what they would want to talk about, and to write with seniors in the room with teens, because a lot happened in the co-write room that never even made it to the song. But built a little bond between those two individuals in that community. So also, with the Main Street Community Center, it really helps advance their mission of building community, because they're now building bridges intergenerationally within their community center, within their community. It was really, that was like a side bonus that we weren't anticipating, but it was really great.
That's great.
And Becky has this amazing gift of like somehow finding the main theme of what that commonality is, and then it's the title or something. It'll be like Hard Landings. So we had older dude and a younger kid, and maybe they have nothing in common, but the hard landings in life, which is actually in that particular song like a joke about one guy jumps off the barn and the other guy actually.
Well, they had both lived on a farm,
right?
So that was the
common experience, and it's like.
But then they both started talking about like the hard things that have happened to them in their life, and had some similar, very, very unique, but they had that was similar to the two of them. So it was very special to see that.
It seems like you keep uncovering this like human element in the song writing process. It seems to be common, and not only are you kind of pulling that, it's actually very unique in like the music. It's like you're building a music niche as well within that. So you're finding commonality in this new story of how you extract people's story. But then there's very much a niche in here that I'm hearing. I haven't heard that from other particular bands or anything like that. And are you doing that like intentionally, or is it just falling? Is it just happenstance that you keep bumping into this? Like maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're seeking these opportunities.
Would you want to go?
Oh,
well, it's interesting. I'm glad that you brought that up, because a lot of people have asked us when we play the songs out publicly, they say, can we find them on Spotify? Are you guys going to put these online? And we did not think about that when we started. I mean, that was just not something. We were just going to record the songs and perform them. But that is something that we're very interested in now, partly because like when we've played Larry's song, the veteran, the Navy veteran, we saw somebody in a crowd once that had a retired Navy hat on. And so we said, oh, can we play a song for you? And he said, sure. We kind of explained, what it was, and we played it. And by the end, he was in tears.
He was bawling and
took off his hat and showed us the double dolphins, which he was a submariner. We had no idea he was a submariner as well, right?
He was.
And he said that the song, he said it wasn't his story, but it was his story, And then whenever we play it out for anywhere there are veterans, I mean, people always resonate with it. So you're right, there's something about it. And I feel like we have to give credit where credit is due. This idea came about because I was reading Mary Gaucher's book.
That's right.
She's a songwriter, a folk songwriter. Saved by a Song is the name of that book. It's an excellent book. And in it, just one tiny little bit, she talks about a program that she's involved with called Songwriting with Soldiers. And it's a national nonprofit that's based in Tennessee. And they're a therapeutic model. I mean, they have therapists, they hold retreats, they have trauma-informed therapy, PTSD therapy, and part of their therapeutic process is songwriting. And I thought, how amazing that is. and thinking, oh, I wish we could get involved with something like that. And then I thought, well, no, we could just do that in our own community. We don't need to go to a, and we could do it with anybody. It doesn't have to be therapy. We don't have to be therapists, but we can just offer this as something that would be, therapeutic and cathartic. So that's a long way to say, it is probably some kind of niche. We're just not sure what.
Yeah, and we also not toyed. We're, when we have enough songs, perhaps maybe there'll be like an album of them. And like even Crazy Like a Fox, a song we wrote with Larry Cowden, the Submariner. I remember we had a show called Music on the Mountain in Windham Mountain where, it's a big stage, there's a lot of people. And our drummer, Frank Picarazzi goes, wait, guys, we're not doing Crazy Like a Fox. Like he didn't even realize that the song, he didn't necessarily fully realize it was part of our Share Your Story program. He just thought it was one of the songs we just wrote.
Yeah.
He loved the song. So it's like, and he goes, I love that song. And I was like, wow, that's great. And, and then I don't know if Dear Me applies, but it kind of does. I mean, yeah. So we were interviewed by a magazine, which is now called Connect to Northern Westchester. And at the time it was called Katona Connect. And this young lady who's in high school, who's amazing. Just when we were telling her about what we're doing, she was like, hey, I just started a chapter in my high school, not a chapter,
a
nonprofit called Dear Me that deals with eating disorders. And it had gotten to a point where they have enough interest and she winds up partnering with the National Alliance for Eating Disorders.
I think that's right.
And so that she asked us to perform at a benefit, and would we be willing to share her story?
To write a song
with her. And so we did. And actually, I think, Jamie, you might have heard that, actually. I think we might have played that. When you guys were there. But it's it may be my favorite song we've ever written. And it's so powerful because, the music starts kind of acoustic guitar and a voice. And then when the next verse comes in, it's like intense, the music's just great. And so we're proud to say that song, for us, it was great. For her, it was great. We got to perform it in Manhattan for her fundraiser. And not that the song is related, but just kudos to her. She worked so hard that I think she was recognized by the United Nations like a few months ago.
Wow.
It's like, and so you never know what happens when you go down this path.
Yeah. And that song, that when we played that song out a lot, I mean, that is a song that hits, like it really hits people.
Yeah.
And so it is an interesting thing. I mean, I think that there's something to be said about real, honest, vulnerable messages in general. And when you put it to music, I think it kind of gets in there a different way. And I just think in a world where everything feels so fractured and scattered, and it's just, there's something resonant about when you hear someone's struggle and how they made it through, or just even a happy song about their life, how it can uplift you as well.
Yeah, so Pete, I've seen you write songs, and I've seen you write songs like all of a sudden the song was there, and then I've seen you write songs that took a long period of time. And so what I just thought to ask is, like, as artists, as songwriters, what's the difference between sort of writing a song, having a song come to you, and sitting down and saying, I'm going to write a song right now? Could you talk about like the differences there? Because that's what you guys are doing here now. Someone's coming in cold, right?
Yeah.
We're going to write a song right now in this session, versus you're walking around, you're going for a jog, and a melody gets in your head, or a verse pops down, you write it down. What's the difference there with that process?
Or even just to kind of jump in there, like the like a writer's block. Imagine getting writer's block in a situation like that, and that's all part of the process.
That's a big fear.
Yeah. And we're
gonna need more coffee.
Jump way back. There are some songs. There's a song, Jamie, that we used to perform 20 years ago. that I had based the lyrics on Gandhi's motivating and galvanizing Indian national consciousness. And then the lyrics never worked out. And I remember during COVID, we tried to rewrite that
Right.
lyrically and this and that.
I forgot about that.
Song, even though it was done,
Yeah.
it's just never hit its mark, you know? So
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
songs that take a long time to write. And I think, and you know, from a personal note, this perspective, which actually Becky has shared with me, more so than me with her, I think, is when you're in a Nashville songwriting room, you're done, you know, and you've got a 3-hour block and you got to write to X. Yeah, it gets done. But one of the things that we find we have to do is tease out and articulate the truth of that experience.
Yeah.
And we've gotten really good at distilling that kind of quickly. Like she said, it's like there's a genuine reality that comes out. It's not just the truth, it's like a candor and a genuine honesty that in this kind of fractured world where we just hear it and we put it together, and we've gotten really good at it, you know. During COVID, we were, well, even after, and a little before, we were doing some corporate things where we did an activity where we ghostwrite over a song. So it might be a song
Like a
everyone
popular
knows.
song, yeah.
Like what's the one we just did?
Sweet Caroline.
Sweet Caroline. So she'll take a group in one room and I'll take the group in the other. And then instead of the lyrics to Sweet Caroline, it's distilling the mission statement of the company
Or the work they did that day or whatever.
into verse 1 and verse 2, and then it's a competition.
Right.
And then clearly her group always wins.
That's
Or
a
if
lot of
not,
fun.
It doesn't matter. I'll lose anyway. It doesn't matter.
Everybody wins.
You know,
That's a lot of
and
fun.
then we sing it, we synthesize, we put it back together. So it's a skill we just keep doing. And I think we get, I mean, really, not that you get better at it, there are impasses. Like when we did that last batch of songs, the one I was worried about the most was going to be distilling this 93-year-old's experiences of
Right.
World War II. You know, she tells us a story about she had to sleep in ditches and Nazis are shooting over her, you know, and they took over her parents' house as their headquarters in their Dutch town. And that was one of the quickest ones we did, right?
It was, yeah. But also, like, to your point, Carlos, like, yes, when we go into each one of these, yeah, we're feeling there's a little bit of anxiety, right? Because we don't know, right? And the thing that I think has been the most challenging and eye-opening and exciting, I guess, for me in experiencing this is that going into the room and having full out trust that what needs to be said is going to be said, and what needs to be written is going to be written, and really trusting that the right song is going to be written for that person. And it has not failed us once. And I think it's going in just with that genuine, open mindset, because oftentimes when we are approaching our own music, our own songs, we get way too precious about it, or we think we have an idea in our head about what this song is supposed to be about, right? Or what would go with that melody. And we get a little attached to our own ideas, right? Going into these songwriting rooms, it's not about us at all. Not at all. And in so many ways, it's liberating for us to allow what is supposed to be coming through to come through. And as artists, that's a really energizing.
Yeah.
It's a really energizing, and it actually, for me, it informs my own songwriting and allows me to be a little more free with my own songwriting and not to hold things too precious and just allow the truth to be the truth.
Yeah.
And then just to put a little bow on that, there are 2 songs that I've been writing for about a year and a half, or 2 years probably, or maybe more. I don't even know. And I have changed the lyrics, the entire lyrics, other than maybe the first verse of this one, probably 5 times, because I know it's not where I need it to feel. When we leave these rooms with the Share Your Story program, like we feel that feeling of we did, because like she said, like there's a part of me that's so tied up in the song I'm writing. And when it's their story, we get to just kind of bring that skill to honoring that story. And so that to me is a big distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's a really interesting perspective. You know, there's something to be kind of learned there when you think about it. It's like, as artists, as writers, as people that are maybe good at their craft, liberating yourself when you do it for others puts you in a different mindset that then sharpens your own skills. I think that was very insightful.
Yeah. And it's also, you know, you could carry it into just life in general of that. I think a lot of times we come to interactions with people and we have a set idea of what the interaction is going to be like, or what should have to be said, or what needs to be said, or instead of approaching it a little more open-heartedly and saying whatever is supposed to be said, or whatever I'm supposed to learn, or whatever is supposed to be brought to the table, I'm going to receive it and, you know, try to see where the truth is in that so that I can find the way forward. I mean, that's what we're doing in each one of these songwriting sessions.
Yeah.
We are finding our way forward. We're finding the melody. We're finding the verse. We're finding the chorus. I mean, it's a process of discovery. It's a never ending process of discovery.
And just to like really showcase that, like I keep going back to the song we wrote with the 93-year-old. Well, I shouldn't keep saying her age.
Betty, I know.
I know I shouldn't say her age as like the lead, but the young lady who survived the Nazis.
But has been married 70 years in
Yeah.
February. Like,
Wow.
that's all she wanted
Great.
to talk
Yeah.
about. Like it was,
Aw.
that was easy to
Yeah.
find the truth of her
Yeah.
story because she just wanted to talk about that and her husband and their
She just
story. It
kept
was,
talking about it.
it was wonderful.
And
Yeah.
just to put in perspective, musically, that may be the most complex. It's like jazz chords with a not 1 4 5. You know, it's really and even lyrically, like melodically, how it flows, it's really complex. And I think we wrote that the quickest out of
45 minutes.
Yeah.
We wrote that song.
Wow.
fell out. The truth, it comes out. You can't hide a torch under a basket. It'll just burn itself out. And it's just you gotta let it out.
It's amazing. Yeah, and you were just reminding me of my grandfather. And
I
he,
remember him quite well.
yeah, that's right. You got to meet him. And so he was in World War II, but he was like older. He signed up. He was, I think, in his late 20s. You know, and he said, yeah, I heard that they bombed Pearl Harbor. I went right to Times Square and I waited online. I signed up for the war. And he was a part of the liberation of Dachau. And
Wow.
you know, he would tell me stories, but he would always, of course, as a kid, I'm asking all sorts of stupid questions, you know, and he would stop short of like details, but he would, you know, tell me stories and stuff. And it was finally when he was like 94 or 5 when he had heard a story of someone saying that the Holocaust never happened. And it annoyed him so much that he then just had this outpouring of stories about what he saw at Dachau. And he began crying. And this I never seen him cry. So I thought he was actually made out of rocks. This guy, right? He's like,
he was pretty
yeah, he's like this old school. I tried to hug him once and he didn't understand what was happening. He just kind of because I remember I came back from college, right? And I was hugging everybody. I was like, oh, and I go to him and he was like, what's going on? You know? Right. And so
really
he told this story, just to your point of telling the story. So, you know, there are times when it's like context. You guys are creating this context, this bubble, and getting people to tell their stories within that bubble. And sometimes that's what's needed in a therapeutic process. Other times it's happenstance, which is how it happened with my grandfather, because something happened in the news and then we started talking about it. And then the next day, my mother calls me up and she goes, your grandfather wants to apologize for crying in front of you. So that's like how he was. But so just your stories reminded me of that. It's just really interesting. But it just brings me back to this idea that you are creating this bubble, and you're almost like accelerating this process of like getting to the heart of something, which, is really powerful. So this is not really a question in there, but I guess just going back to my previous question, I'm curious about just your own songwriting styles, and what are they in general? And you did touch upon the fact that you feel like maybe they are changing a little bit based on these experiences. And if you want to talk a little bit about that, I think just it's good for people to understand, if they're not musicians or artists or whatever, what is that process like to create,
Interesting. I feel like I started everyone.
I don't mind. I like when she starts. It's interesting because I find myself, there were periods in my musical career where I got really folky and finger style guitar and really ornate and really deep vocals, and then I go and I feed off of the musicians around me. Like when Jamie, when you and I started different bands, I won't name their names, Monument, The Gathering, which became Chasing Sunday,
Yeah.
and like even the musicians that are around you, like I find myself responding to, and I don't know if you remember Mike Skinner,
Yeah.
drummer, right? So
Yeah.
and he wound up playing with Miracle of '86 and Kevin Devine, and he and I formed like this duo, I think right before you or right around when you and I started playing. And it was just magical. And then I remember I dove back into folk as he got into heavy metal.
Mm,
And so like I find myself, I'm really like a folky, but I love to rock, and I love the world sound, and I love percussive sounds. So like some songs I find myself writing now, like on our album I wrote My Friend years ago, honestly, Jamie, based on his If You Were Playing percussion
mm,
while we're playing it. And so that's definitely how I write. And then some things, honestly, the more Becky and I have been writing songs together, songs that I'm writing now are almost too honest,
mm.
truthful to my heart, that it comes out. And I didn't tell you this, but I've been playing a couple songs at a couple recent shows where I'm just singing these lyrics out loud, and at the end, people are clapping. They have no idea that I wrote that song. They had no idea that I just wrote that. They thought, oh, that's a great song.
Yeah.
That's a good feeling, because it means they're responding to the genuine quality of what's coming out. So
Yeah.
I think this process of share your story is definitely helping me evolve.
Yeah. Well, I'll never forget when you wrote the song "The Month," and
Oh,
you,
big hit.
yeah, right. And you
Yeah.
you came into the rehearsal and you were like, yeah, I may have a new song, and you played it, and I just remember being like, that is a completely polished, perfect song. Like, you may have written a new song. And it was like, and it came from pain that you had,
Yeah.
and then boom, the song was done. And I remember like not wanting to ruin it with the drums. I was like, I don't know, maybe we should, it's like, it sounded so perfect, like it just came to you, right? And then there were songs that took 2 years, like for you to finish, and I watched you do that as well, and that was interesting. And then there were some that maybe were more organic. So it's just and it's interesting to hear about what your style is now, or the way you're writing songs now. And I find it fascinating. So Becky, how about you?
I came to songwriting later in my life, and I'm very much through a process of processing things, I guess. So I don't write, I write folk. That's my main way I write. And I don't write, I thought at first I should write to be more like commercial and more, acceptable that way. And certainly that's what, like Nashville songwriters are really good at doing. They write commercial songs that have hooks and all these, different pieces of craft in it. But I don't really write that way. I write, what's honest. And I feel like that's probably why I was so drawn to do a program like Share Your Story, and why we even got into custom songs to begin with, is that I I like to give witness to the real process of something, or the real person, or the real story of what's going on. And it's going to be pretty personal, and it's not always going to be completely universal, although you do use some craft to try to build that in, so that you're not sitting up there writing about, you know, something so specific that your audience has no relationship with whatsoever. But all my songs always come from that place of real honest process. And yeah, I find when I get tripped up in my own songwriting, it's because I'm getting too much in my head about what it should say
Right.
instead of what it is meant to say.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Like, what's, you know, where do you see 2024, 2025 going?
Good
That's a great question. You know, we just came out with an album a little while ago, kind of the culmination of us writing songs. And the irony is some of the stuff we may be writing now or sounds more singer-songwriter or more folk or more like bands in my head, more like maybe like a Wilco of old, or maybe other different, you know, sounds. But the album probably sounds more like the band meets Fleetwood Mac with some Americana grooves. And as much as we're proud of it, I think we're still even evolving sound-wise in what we're doing. And for me, I know that definitely happens. And you know, and I remember, actually, Jamie and I might have been talking about this 20 years ago, but you take a band like the Beatles and you compare them to a band that was their peer, like I'll just think of a random name, the Dave Clark Five. So the Beatles come out, and so do the Dave Clark Five, and the Beatles keep taking over the world, and the Dave Clark Five just kind of fizzles away because the Beatles kept changing and growing, not only responding to culture, but being honest to the artistic process and putting a step forward where no one else would, whether it's John Lennon being quirky or Paul McCartney taking a musical risk, you know. And so I think that's an ideal as an artist. You always want to keep evolving. And I think we're both very open to seeing where that goes. You know, we have a full backing band, but last year and the year before, I think we did 100 gigs last year.
Wow.
Together, plus maybe another 20 that she did, another 20 or 30 I did with other projects, or subbing on a bass in a band or playing drums, or she might guest star and sing a song somewhere. So it's like, what did we calculate? One every 2.7 days or something we were gigging. Yeah. And when we play, this is going to sound very modest, but Jamie, you know this, like I think also this may be why Share Your Story is strong, because we give it all. It's like our one show in front of 12 people, or our show in front of 500 people or 1,000. We're so involved, at least I think we are, in what's going on musically on stage in that moment, to try to be a catalyst for the music for the people that are there and for the emotive quality for ourselves, that we give it all. And it takes so much energy. And then to do like a 3-hour show like that, and then, you know, and then pack up and then do that same night a 3-hour show, it took a lot out of us the last couple of years. So
yeah, I think for 2024, our big goal for Share Your Story is to really expand that program. We were excited. We expanded it in 2023, which was great. We got the community center was able to get grant funding through an arts program. We're looking to do some fundraising up in the community this winter, and also continue to get grants to expand that program, because of course, now that we've done it there for 2 years in a row, people are like, wait a minute, I want to do that. You know, so now everybody wants to do it. So demand is high, and we're very keen on getting this into assisted living facilities, where we really feel like we try to find places that have community already a little bit established, because that witnessing part is so important.
Yeah.
And so we really want to try to find the communities where this program would be a good complement to other things that are going on inside of that community, and that would help, you know, advance their goals. So assisted living facilities, hearing those stories, and just expanding the Share Your Story program is a big focus of ours in the coming year.
Yeah, and the why is so important. It's like when we did the concert where we performed the songs up in Wyndham a couple months ago. I don't even know, or 2 months, a month and a half ago. The the audience is responding to the other participants' songs, hearing it, and honoring it, and valuing it. And so think of like an assisted living facility where, like our friend, one of our friend's mothers is in New Jersey, and she's been struggling with MS for like 40 years, but she's totally cognizant and she can't really do much. And so the thinking is, just imagine for that person what it's like to have this awesome story, and then she gets to perhaps hopefully hear that performed in front of her peers.
Yeah.
It's also so edifying for a community. And I think as people get older too, like people tend to be forgotten.
Yeah.
I think, Jamie, you might remember my grandmother. She passed away a few years ago at the age 100, and I just remember her saying how certain people who remain nameless in my family just never necessarily reached out to her as much, and how sad she was, and so I don't know. I think it's giving people a voice who not necessarily would have
Have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also,
Yeah,
maybe a little more with their families, like your grandfather telling you, finally having that moment of telling you and sharing that with you. But, I think that that's a big possibility too, with some of these opportunities to write with people, that they'll share things their families never knew. And what a great thing for the families as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's really powerful. And you brought up a lot of great examples that are really powerful. And I hope it does expand. So one more time, how people can find it.
Yep. So the Share Your Story is on our website, our studio website, which is FOUR and the numbers 26studios.com. That's where you'll find all the Share Your Story info.
That's great.
Yeah.
Some music here, right? I think as that the sound that you have, so folks can experience that. Then a little factoid, right? Our intro music, our outro music, also done by Peter and his talent there with 426. So a big shout out there, and thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great.
It's more Jamie's music, really, right?
Right, but you pieced it together. Yeah.
And actually, I would be remiss. We came out with our album not just on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and all the things you can digitally get it. So we encourage everyone who's seeing this or listening to check it out on all those online things. We also came out with it in a limited edition recycled vinyl. And we're proud to say we did all the artwork ourselves, even though she did like 99% of it. It's so great. I was like, no, maybe move the road.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a rose. Move and I'm colorblind, and so for me, it's like so beautiful. It's even better,
Great. You were like, make the logo bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. But
the artwork is beautiful. The album's great. The album's called Broken Pieces. So to be able to find that is great.
And you can get it on our album. You can order it through our website. Get it on our website. Order the album through our website. Yeah.
It's great. All right, Peter, Becky, thank you so much. It was great talking with you guys and hearing that story and learning more about everything that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, and we'll connect again later in the year to do kind of a recap and see what other communities you've been able to build now. I know they're going to be many.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we should do that.
We could
all right.
Share your story.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.